Good morning and welcome to the online worship service at First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Jen Jaksa. I'm the newest of the newbies on the standing committee, so this is indeed my debut as welcomer. There are a number of important updates and community matters this week. I did, however, want to highlight the good works of some of the members of our congregation in supporting Food is Love. It's a program that is providing frozen meals to anyone who needs them. Our crew will be at the Congregational Church cooking to fill the freezers. There are more details in community matters about how you can support this important effort, or if you or someone you know would benefit from the program. So on to our service. It's our last in the Soul Matters theme of deep listening. Please enjoy.
Good morning. It's good to be here. The prelude today is actually called Morning, and it's by composer Jennifer Haines. I discovered her about 10 years ago, just doing like Google searches for composers. Oh, that activated my Google. Cool. That's looking for composers who were still around and still writing, and I stumbled upon Jennifer Haines. I believe I've played some of her music before. This song is from an album called Thoughts and Dreams. And again, this song is called Morning, and we'll hear the key piece, Thoughts and Dreams, for the Offertory today.
What is it about this flame that opens our ears, opens our hearts? Come back to your center, it calls. Return to that quiet space we long for and that longs for us. From this stillness, always a voice arises, if we let it. So come, friends, let us listen once again. Let us find that flame inside that guides us back home. The words of the Reverend Scott Tayler. Let us worship. This is the time in our service for lighting your candle or your chalice at home if you have one, and for saying our covenant, so get ready. And this week we will be guided by Eliza Hammer.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Eliza. Welcome to the online live worship service of First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I'm so happy and so lucky to be the minister of this incredible congregation. I'm so glad that you found us this morning on YouTube Live. And every week, the link is the same. It came out funny in the email I sent around. I apologize for that. But the email is always youtube.com/First Church Unitarian Littleton altogether /live. It will always get you here on a Sunday morning. So we'll get this right. So welcome. So great to have you with us this morning. Some thank yous. Thank you to Jen Jaksa for doing our Community Matters this morning. Thank you to Chris Ursuline, who puts it out every week. Thank you, of course, to Eliza Hammer for our chalice lighting this morning. That was great. It makes me giddy too, Eliza. And thank you to, of course, Molly for the great music. Thank you to Mike Pillman for doing our videos and tech help. And thank you this week for our Time for All Ages. We have Jen Banks. And thank you, Jen, for making a great video. So look forward to seeing that. This morning, we're finishing up the October Soul Matters theme of deep listening. So this will be our last service this year on that topic, probably. So I hope you've enjoyed this deep listening series. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Molly to introduce our first hymn, which is number 389.
Hello again. As Reverend Lara said, our first hymn is number 389. You will also have the text on the screen to sing along to. I have two things to say about it. I know. The first thing is I was trying to find some information about the composer of the piece, Phil Porter, but I could only find that another Phil who had some credits as a British playwright. So if anybody has any information, I'd be very curious to hear what you know about this song. The other thing is you will hear the voices of the church choir singing this, and we will be singing it in a round. I'll have you sing it one time through with the church choir, and then we'll split into two different rounds, and you can sing whatever you would like to sing.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in the gathered here draw struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near.
Thank you so much, Molly and the choir. I hadn't listened to that yet. That was beautiful. Thank you, choir. It's always so great when you're able to make these recordings. Thank you so much for your ministry of music. It's my great pleasure now to introduce this week's Time for All Ages, which will be shared for us by Jen Banks. And Jen made a great little video. So thank you so much, Jen. Enjoy.
Good morning. Today's Time for All Ages is a story about Henry David Thoreau. And Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson lived very nearby where we are. They were Unitarians also who lived in Concord, Massachusetts. And if you've ever been down to Walden Pond, then you've been very close to where they lived. So here's Mr. Thoreau with his very impressive beard. And this is the cabin that he built. You can see from the inside as well, it's very small. And so what he would do many times, people say, is take one of his 3 chairs and sit outside and just listen to nature and maybe do some writing and thinking. And that's what our story is about today. Henry sat in front of his little cabin on one of his 3 chairs, listening to the evening. If you were there, you might have thought there was nothing to listen to. Certainly no television or Xbox. Those wouldn't be around for 100 years or more. There was no one to talk with, no airplanes overhead, no radio coming from next door. Mr. Emerson's house, the closest thing to a next-door neighbor, was over a mile away. Not that he had a TV in any case either. Even the natural world was still. No wind rippled the pond, and the birds had stopped singing as night approached. Still, Henry listened for the tiniest sounds. A small fish breaking the surface of the water and splashing down again, the crackle of leaves as a mouse passed by, the sound of wings as a crow passed overhead. To him, these miniature sounds were music. Of course, most of the townspeople thought Henry David Thoreau was crazy when he decided to build a tiny cabin from used materials out in Emerson's wood lot by Walden Pond. Why would a promising writer want to move away from society to sit with birds and bugs for company? In fact, Henry enjoyed the company of Emerson and the other thinkers who shared his transcendentalist philosophy. However, to him, the quiet of the pond and the animals and plants that lived in and around it provided excellent company also. Sometimes, Henry thought, the conversation you learn the most from is the one in which the least is said. As he watched the last rays of light glisten on the pond, Henry thought about the biblical story about the prophet Elijah, who crawled off to a mountain cave to listen for what God wanted him to do. While Elijah stood outside his cave, a great wind whipped around the mountains, sending boulders crashing to the ground in the fury of its passing. But God wasn't in the wind. Then an earthquake rattled the mountain with a terrific rumbling. But God wasn't in the earthquake. Then came a fire sweeping across the rocks and brush outside the cave, red and roaring and grand. But God wasn't in the fire either. Finally, after all the roaring and crashing, everything became quiet. Elijah stood there shaking, wrapped in his cloak, just waiting, and out of the silence came the still, small voice of his God. I'm not at all sure, thought Henry, that I believe in that God of the Bible, the one who chatted with Elijah. But whatever God is, I'm pretty sure I know it better out here in the quiet than I would through any ranting sermon. Maybe God is speaking to me in the small voice of the jumping fish and the rustling leaves, the still pond and the stars beginning to peek through the trees. Maybe I can hear God when my heart is still and I can listen with my very smallest inner ear. Maybe. And his thoughts drifted off with a small breeze that came and ruffled his hair and rippled across the quiet lake.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was a great video. I love how everyone is telling these stories in their own voices and with their own visual devices and so on. It's great. That was wonderful. Thank you. So this is the time in our weekly worship. It's an opportunity for generosity. This congregation, First Church Unitarian Littleton, is self-supporting. We rely on the generosity of our members and friends to keep our ministries going. And so if you're able to give a gift this week of your own treasure, we would so appreciate it, or to make a pledge payment as well. You could either mail it to the church with a check to First Church Unitarian, attention Assistant Treasurer, 19 Foster Street, Littleton, Massachusetts, 01460, or go to our website, fculittle.org, and look for the yellow donate button, and it will explain the ins and outs of donating online. So thank you. And this morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation.
And I hope you enjoy the offertory song for today. As I said before, it's called Thoughts and Dreams by Jennifer Haines, a wonderful composer who is in the Minnesota area.
This week, we're thinking about listening, deep listening to our inner voice. And there are a few different ways to think about your inner voice. Some people think of it as that little voice on your shoulder that tells you when something is right or wrong, that proverbial little devil on your shoulder tempting you to go astray, or that proverbial little angel on your shoulder telling you to do the right thing. That's the voice of conscience. There's another inner voice, the inner voice of your consciousness. We've talked a little bit about this before. Last March, in the last service we had in person in our sanctuary, actually, it happens that I preached about Julian Jaynes and his theory of the bicameral mind and how human consciousness developed. I'm not going to revisit that theory now, but I'll simply note that modern Homo sapiens are fully conscious beings. And like Jaynes, when I use the word consciousness, I'm not talking about cognition. I'm not talking about that ability to think analytically and to solve problems. Like Jaynes, I'm using the word consciousness, meaning introspection, literally, to look inside, to look within. I'm talking about our inner lives. We humans have such rich inner worlds. Most, not all, but most people have an internal monologue going, at least some of the time. Most, not all, but most people have this. It varies from person to person. Some people have an almost continuous internal monologue going. Some people have it just sort of now and then. And the form it takes from person to person is a little bit different. But I think you know what I'm talking about. In Buddhism, an important concept is the monkey mind. This is a way of describing the stream of thoughts that goes through our minds. It seems to be never ending. Our consciousness, our inner lives can be amazingly active. I'm someone whose inner monologue runs a lot. Often inner monologues will be gentler and say encouraging things to us, but unfortunately, often inner monologues include a lot of negative thoughts about ourselves. There's no guarantee with the monkey mind what might pop up for anyone. Well, I've been thinking about deep listening all month, and we've been thinking about how to listen deeply to others. And one thing we know is that if you talk and talk and talk, you'll never hear anything, right? How can you listen if you're talking? And some people like to say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth so that you'll listen more than you'll talk. You have to stop talking to listen. That's step 1 of listening, or even deep listening. It's the most basic step. But guess what? To hear your inner voice, your deepest, truest inner voice, the one that Henry David Thoreau was trying to hear, you have to stop talking too. Yeah, you have to stop flapping your lips to hear your truest, deepest inner voice, but you have to stop your internal monologue from yapping away also. Or at least you need to get past the internal monologue. You need to shut out that monkey mind just for glimpses of your true inner voice. And that's what certain spiritual practices are for. Various forms of meditation give techniques to get past the monkey mind, or really to move on from it when it's intruding to the true inner voice. Centering prayer is another spiritual practice that can help get us to that deeper, true inner voice. And hopefully later this year, I will be offering some Zoom videos on techniques for that. And of course, our own Caradwin offers the shamanic journey, and there are other experts among us who know how to do wonderful meditation and spiritual practices. But this morning, I ask if you can listen deeply past your inner monologue, past your monkey mind, what is the inner voice that you will hear? What will be the payoff, in a sense, for deep listening to your truest inner voice? I preached on Hinduism a while back, and I talked to you a bit about Vedanta, the wisdom tradition of Hinduism that comes from the intuitions of the Vedas, scriptures that date back thousands of years. They're among the oldest sacred scriptures known in the world. Vedanta gives us some ancient yet still relevant notions about our inner voice, our essence, our true self. In a couple of weeks, on November 14th, it will be the Hindu holiday of Diwali, the Festival of Lights. Diwali is a time to honor the light within each one of us, the light that is our true essence. This light is often known in Hinduism and in Vedanta as Atman. So how do we know that we have this essence, this Atman? And what does that even mean? For instance, when I think of the question, who am I? Who am I deep inside in my innermost essence, my deepest inner voice? In Vedanta, to use the Sanskrit terms, there's a key concept that I've mentioned before a few times called Drig Drisha Vivek. Drig means seer, Drisha means seen, and Vivek means discernment. So Drig Drisha Vivek is the discernment between what is the seer and what is the seen. According to this thinking, again, if you can see something or hear something, it's not you. So a question, are you in your deepest self, your mind, your thoughts, your ideas, your intellect? Vedanta says that the mind is a flow of thoughts. The mind is like a river. But you can know your thoughts, as my Vedanta teacher taught me. You can observe your thoughts as they come and as they go. And in that sense, you're seeing your thoughts. You can see your mind, so you're not your mind. So in thinking of Drig Drisha Vivek, the discernment between the seer and the seen, who is the true seer? When you close your eyes, beyond your thoughts, there's some other I am there. There's something inside beyond thoughts. There's something in you that knows. There's a watcher within you. It's a seer that sees and observes your thinking. What is that? In Vedanta, that's Atman. Vedanta also tells us that the core of each human is pure bliss, but most of us don't see it because we focus on our bodies, our thoughts, our attachments. According to Vedanta, where there is no mind, you are the internal light. Where there is no mind, you are the Atman. Where there is no mind, you are Brahman, the divine being. You are God, if you will. Reality, according to this, is that which is eternal, that which is unchanging, and that is Atman, which is the same as Brahman, and that is all that really is. As the great Vivekananda says, you are not merely body and mind. Don't let yourself be degraded, he says. There is but one infinite force in the universe. I am that, and you are that. Not parts of it, but the whole of it. There is the same pure white light, an emission of the divine being in the center of each. So says Vivekananda. In many ways, this idea of Atman reminds me very much of the inner light that the Religious Society of Friends, also known as the Quakers, talk about. George Fox was a 17th century English dissenter from the Church of England and the founder of the Religious Society of Friends. Before they became known as the Religious Society of Friends and before they were nicknamed Quakers, Fox and his followers called themselves Children of the Light. Fox was imprisoned many times for his blasphemy, and so were many of his followers. The Friends rejected creeds. It's one of the ways in which they're similar to us. They believed that God is everywhere, not specifically found in churches or temples. But possibly the most blasphemous belief they had was this idea of the inner light, or the light of God that is within all of us. As Fox wrote in his journal, there is that of God in everyone. This puts the Friends into the territory of esoteric Christianity, a kind of mystical Christianity that has long been frowned upon by the established Orthodox Church with a small o. This belief that the light of God is inside everyone also leads many Friends to a kind of small u universalism, the belief that ultimately everyone will be saved and spared from hell, if there is a hell. The inner light of the Quakers is not synonymous with God. To say that you have the light of God in you is not to say that you are God. So that's the Quaker or the Friends version of this inner light. Someone who was very heavily influenced by both the idea of Atman as well as this inner light of the Friends was Ralph Waldo Emerson. And we heard a little bit about him during our Time for All Ages today. Emerson was once a Unitarian minister, but ultimately he found the Unitarianism of his day, the mid-19th century, to be too stuffy, and so he left parish ministry. He, like Henry David Thoreau, was one of the Transcendentalists, a group of liberal religious folks in Concord in the 1840s. Many of them were Unitarians. These Transcendentalists wanted to be free from traditional Protestant Christianity. Or at least they wanted to experience it in a radically new way. One of the distinctive things about the Transcendentalists was that they incorporated learnings from the Hindu and Buddhist scriptures and concepts. Given that there was so little scholarship about Hinduism and Buddhism in European languages at that time, it's not surprising that they sometimes mixed up the two traditions, sort of conflating the concepts. But nonetheless, they were successful in getting far from traditional Christianity into a very different way of thinking. One of Emerson's most famous essays from 1841 is called The Oversoul. And just as it sounds, the essay was focused on the soul. What is its nature? How is it connected to God? And so on. Many of his conclusions are straight out of Vedanta. He talks about the mistake that many of us make, thinking our thoughts and ego or conscious ego is our true self, when our true self is so much more than that, as you heard Vivekananda say. Emerson sees our true self, or our soul, as an underlying unity of all things. This is very much like the Atman Brahman idea, but instead of using those terms, he uses the term oversoul. Emerson writes of the oversoul as the ultimate unity. He wrote, "Within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one," says Emerson. And you can hear echoes of the concept Drig, Drisha, Vivek in there. And so it is very much in our larger transcendentalist flavored Unitarian Universalist tradition to seek the light within. That is, in this way of thinking, your truest, deepest inner voice. You just have to get past your inner monologue to hear it. Maybe the inner light is the oversoul or the Atman Brahman, or maybe it's the source with a capital S within you. I like to think that if I successfully, for glimpses and moments of time, listen deeply to my inner voice, there deep inside is the voice of the cosmos, the voice of the universe, a glimpse of ultimate mystery. To hear it is peace. To hear it is bliss. To hear it is to know truly that you are that. May we find the way to this gift, to hearing the beauty of that deep inner voice. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. I'd like to invite Molly to share with us something about our closing hymn, number 391.
I think this hymn is very appropriate to what Reverend Lara was just saying. And I know we've sung it before, but as we go through it right now, I invite you to think about what the words mean to you, and how I think they're a message of hope and being able to sing together. Here is our last hymn, Voice Still and Small.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, sing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through the years singing. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through the years singing.
Friends, this is a time for our closing words. And again, if you were here with me in the sanctuary, we would get in a circle and hold hands. But today, I invite you, if there's someone there with you and you can safely hold hands, please do. If not, if you're alone in the room, as I am here in this beautiful sanctuary, I invite you to hold your own hands together like this. Feel that warmth? And in your mind's eye, there's an interesting term, in your mind's eye, picture this loving community of members and friends and others unknown to us out there watching on YouTube right now for these closing words. Deep inside each of us, something more beautiful, more glorious than our external self exists. Deep inside each of us, beyond the busy thoughts, the racing mind, there lies a stillness, a still, quiet voice. If we can reach that place of peace and bliss, there we will find deep wisdom and deep knowing. It is good to know that this beauty exists deep inside of every one, of every living being. May we find this peace and this bliss. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
Our postlude today comes to you from the mind of George Harrison of the Beatles. I'm going to play an instrumental version of The Inner Light, and I thought I'd share with you some of the lyrics. Here are the lyrics to this Beatles song. Without going out of your door, you can know all things on earth. Without looking out of your window, you could know the ways of heaven. The farther one travels, the less one knows. Arrive without traveling, see all without looking, do all without doing.